as with a lot of people who operate in this field, real life experience is the foundation of where I come from. So I got introduced to interviewing as a police officer, as a UK police officer. And that extended for me becoming an interview trainer at a time when the UK went through a revolution in the way that it viewed the subject of talking to victims, witnesses, and suspects. And I took that interest as far as doing a PhD alongside my police career. And that has ultimately led me to work in numerous countries around the world, because this is a global subject in terms of the way that police officers interact with citizens, members of society, when they're victims, witnesses, or suspects involved in criminal investigations. And there's an awful lot of similarity in the issues in every country in the world. Talking to people when they are involved in criminal incidents, the police are in a very powerful position. And historically, the way that the police have dealt with that is to work out who they think has committed a crime and then get that person to confess. There are a lot of problems with that approach. First of all, sometimes when we believe people to be guilty, they're not, because people make mistakes, suspicions are wrong. And secondly, because that approach is indicative of a mindset that goes on hunch and rumor and not hard facts and evidence. And that ultimately was what drove the UK government to ban a lot of the practices that relate to confession-focused interviewing, or interrogation is the other term for it. And so that resulted in this broader approach, of which conversation management is at the very heart of, which is about valuing all the information that is available to you as an investigator and making sure that you would do a good job of gathering it, not just when the suspect's in front of you, but when you're talking to victims and witnesses too. Country after country has hit the same issues that the UK hit. They've realized that there is a problem in their criminal justice system, that people are getting locked up who have not committed a crime or who there is no evidence against, and they've confessed. And those confessions are either completely wrong, in that the person is absolutely innocent, or they were coerced out of that person and they didn't follow the rules of justice. And subsequently, when they've been re-examined, the convictions have been quashed. When that happens, it inevitably leads to stricter rules for the police forces to follow. And when that happens, the police don't do very well. Because, to take the UK example, one of the measures that was brought in was the mandatory recording of every interview. And when that happened, it exposed the fact that the police weren't very good. So this impression you get from the TV or from Hollywood or books that the police can skillfully break people down doesn't hold up when it's examined in real life. There are a series of things, reliable things, that the research now tells us that do work, because they're fairer and more effective. And that's where training comes in, because the way that you need to approach this is to give the police officers more support to do their job. It starts with the mindset. The most important tool to the investigator or the interviewer is mindset. It's what are they seeking to achieve? Now, what a lot of the early research showed, which was done with real cops in real life situations, was that the police officers very quickly formed a view about what had happened in a crime. So they'd turn up to a robbery, a bank robbery, and as soon as they gathered initial information, they would start to make assumptions about the way it happened. And then they would introduced those assumptions into the interviews as they spoke to witnesses. So they were seeking confirmation, basically, what they thought had happened. And that was demonstrated that what came out of that was they asked questions in a particular way by using what's called leading phrasing, which helps the person you're asking the question with, a helpful answer, like the color of the vehicle. What was it, a red car that you saw? Was he a big guy who had the gun? And then all of a sudden, the evidence starts to look magically stronger because these witnesses confirm what your first witness says. Same thing happens with suspects in the police station. If the police officer makes the leap that the person they've got in front of them has done it, or has done it in a particular way, the same thing comes out when they ask the questions. And then depending on the situation, that can either result in coercive interviewing, which is actually bullying, or it's just mild persuasion and manipulation for people to go along. And what we do know is that things like low IQ and literacy difficulties occur at a much higher proportion in suspects. So the people that are generally getting spoken to as suspects in the police station are not people best equipped to resist that type of persuasive or guilt-driven approach. You need to have leaders that get behind the training and will then support the message, and then the quality assurance post-training that people are doing the right things, and they're getting rewarded for doing the right things, and they're getting given feedback when they do the wrong things. And we do get involved in real life reviews of cases with departments, and we give feedback, not from a theoretical ivory tower perspective, but from a real life effectiveness and legal admissibility perspective. And mistakes do happen. So if you're just a reactive leader, then you'll wait for a crisis or a scandal, then you'll try and react to it and do something different. If you're a proactive leader, this is the type of thing you do, is you watch the science, which is now telling us very clearly what works and what doesn't work in terms of interviewing. And you incorporate those policies and that training into your workforce at supervisory level and at operational level. Interviewing is a microcosm of all of policing. When citizens interact with police officers, it's a trust issue. And so if they know that the officers from that organization will talk to you ethically, objectively, will ask you proper questions, and will be objective when they deal with you, then that is a massive positive for trust between the police force and the community. One of the things that's coming up increasingly in the US now are false evidence ploys, and numerous states are now looking at banning false evidence ploys. If you think about it, it's a hugely damaging tactic without much positive advantage. If the public know that you can lie to them when you interview them as a suspect, they will not trust you. We know it doesn't work. If you try and use false evidence ploy to the real offender who knows the facts of the case, if your false evidence is wrong, they know you haven't got any evidence. So there's no level upon which that works. But from a strategic point of view, for police and community relations, it's very damaging. It does take time, but you have to start somewhere. But I would go on record as saying in the UK now, the approach is totally different. And the language you hear people use, the way in which people approach interviews with victims, witnesses, and suspects, it is a completely different way to how it was in 1990 when essentially this change started. But it hasn't taken until 2023, but I think it did take a decade. Number one, there is a deterrent effect of recording. If people know they're being recorded, then their behavior tends to improve. But beyond that, they also offer protection to the people who are being interviewed, whether that be victim, witness, or suspect, legal advisor or lawyer in the room. But they're sort of minimums, really. And I think that there's an awful lot of upside to technology in terms of efficiency. So, for example, now it's very easy to record on the street. It didn't used to be. And whereas before you'd have scribbled notes from witnesses spoken to at the scene, now you've got the ability to have verbatim what they said. And that golden hour of investigation, the first information that comes into the police is very important. The recording gives you the opportunity to interact with every stage of the process now and try and get that quality right to produce the reliable information that we want. And then, so that's, the before and the during, and then there's the after. You've got quicker access. As we move forward with technology, there's the opportunity for automatic proofreading or automatic transcribing. And as everyone who's online who's got anything to do with police process knows, that one of the most cumbersome parts of policing is the administration of getting criminal cases to the courts. And so having high quality recordings of any interview gives you a real head start in streamlining the process as it heads towards court. Whereas recording started as a basic deterrent to bad behavior, as the technology has come along, it now offers tremendous opportunity. It needs to be bespoke, really. So the idea is to work out what they need. So for example, small departments really struggle to abstract reasonable numbers of staff from everyday duties into a classroom. They just can't manage it. So you try and get agencies together. Bigger agencies have rostered training days, so you can generally work within those. So that's one of your first considerations is logistics. And then the second one is the duties of the officers. Some departments have a specific crime investigation department, some don't. So are you talking to detectives? Are you talking to patrol officers? Are you talking to generalists? So it's really a case of sitting down with the leadership, working out what they want or what they think they want, and then how you can put a plan together to make them better than they were before the training. So I think flexibility is important. And then within that, there are core subjects that need to be covered in any interview training course. And then a massively important part is practice. There's very little point in doing a theory only course. People need to get interviewing. Cops are generally activists anyway. They like to get hands-on. The ultimate thing is to try and give people skills they didn't have before you went there, and to try and ensure that those change behavior in real life. It's the way in which law enforcement talks to citizens is a vitally important area, and it's a great opportunity. It's very easy to get it wrong, and actually it's also quite easy to be much better at it. And I think that's the upside of this. Yes, we all tend to focus on the interrogations, the big cases, but actually there's a lot to be gained from looking at every encounter, from patrol officers up to formal interviews. Recording's a part of that, and so is training.